All right, welcome into the RotoWire Sports Gambling Podcast presented by BetMGM. You can use our promo code BETROTO. You can get a risk-free first bet with that promo code over at BetMGM. You can use the BetMGM app. You can bet on BetMGM.com. That code again is BETROTO, BETROTO. I am Nick Whalen. I am joined, as always, by John McKechnie. John, this is the highlight of my week. Every week, even when we're struggling, as has been the case the last couple of weeks, we've had some rough ones, but I'm confident that we will bounce back here in week 13, although it's a tough slate. It's a tough slate every week, but this one, John, an especially difficult slate.
Yeah, it's really hard to parse out, and you were referencing at the top the BetMGM app. I was on there all last week in Maryland, boots on the ground, man on the scene, and boy, what a slick application that is. So I was having a blast all weekend, all day Thanksgiving, live betting, like dabbling in the World Cup a little bit. Why not? Yeah. Sunday was a blast other than like my real team stuff. I suppose we could probably break the ice on that at some point as well. But
don't worry about it. We'll get into that game.
Oh yeah. But no, it's a slick application they got over there. Gotta love it.
Yeah, I'm picturing you kind of under the Thanksgiving table, locking in some bets between games. I'm here in Wisconsin. It's a little bit more difficult. As I've said a number of times on this pod, you just make a quick trip down to Illinois, lock some things in. We're good for the week. Hopefully Wisconsin will follow suit with Maryland at some point. But you're now back in Georgia. I'm up here in Wisconsin. It is dark. It is cold. My day got off to a really rough start, John. And of course, we won't spend too much time on this, but I went to the gym this morning. At which point, as I was walking in, my phone died and I realized I did not charge it at all overnight. Just a brutal feeling. I got one of those like pad chargers, so it must have just been repositioned. So I'm panicking. I had to work out for a full hour with no podcast, no music. I kept my AirPods in just to give the appearance that I was listening to something.
Yeah, you don't want to look like a crazy person.
Exactly. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody though. It was brutal. I had a terrible workout.
No, I can't imagine not having the power of early 2000s rock like at my side. Like if I'm in there and I don't have Godsmack at the ready, or if I don't have some Every Time I Die circa 2012, yeah, some Tool stuff that you lift heavy objects and put them down with. That just impacts everything. So, despite the light lift for you this morning, I think that this will bring you the power. And we got a commenter, regular commenter on the show with Mario and I, asking why I'm wearing my grandmother's sweater. It is a Christmas sweater. It is the season. Got the Utz Natural, the original
heat.
Yeah, the original Utz potato chip. No free ads, they say, but I'll give a free ad to my favorite potato chip brand.
Yeah, John's grandma being mentioned in the first 4 minutes of the pod. I think that cashes at about 20-1. So anybody who had that, congratulations. You're off to a hot start. All right, John, let's get right into it. Let's talk some Ravens Jags from last week real quickly. And as we like to do, we like to look ahead. We don't like to look back too much. You had the Ravens locked up. I think they closed at what, -4, maybe 3.5 for that game. I was with you. I did not bet that game. Just kind of out of solidarity with the Jags. I remain shocked at what happened last week in Jacksonville. The Jags have been in those type of situations so many times where, they give up the crushing touchdown after that long play to Deshaun Jackson, of course, who does what he does once or twice per year, ripping off that long play. You think, here we go again. The Jags defense just cannot get that stop. Almost never are they able to drive the length of the field and not only score the touchdown, but go for two and get it to win the game. And look, man, I've had to do a complete 180 on Trevor Lawrence, who I think that was the best game of his career and easily the best quarter of his career in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, we've known about this guy since he was like a junior at Cartersville High School in Georgia. Like he's like a living legend basically in that respect. Goes to Clemson, wins the Natty, like wipes Alabama off the face of the earth basically as a true freshman. Continues to amaze and dazzle through the rest of his college career. Gets saddled with walking into the Urban Meyer Jaguars era. Did not love that. That certainly adds that's playing on expert mode, no question about it. That's playing on all Madden. But the tools have always been there. It's just a matter of, the rest of the team around him. But now we know for certain that he can make Zay Jones a thing, and he's made Christian Kirk way better than pretty much anyone could have anticipated. I know that move got panned because of the money, but I think Christian Kirk's a good player, and they're using him right, and he's getting Kirk to work effectively. They win that game without any help from Travis Etienne in the run game. It was all on Trevor, and he rose to the occasion and shredded up this defense that had been playing a lot better over the last month or two. Like when we were talking about the game, it was like, okay, the defense has kind of put those early meltdown issues to bed. Wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Ravens have blown at least a 9-point lead in all 4 losses this season. This actually broke the streak of blowing a double-digit lead in every loss. So maybe a step in the right direction for that Baltimore defense. Like I said, I didn't bet this game straight up, but I did have it involved in my parlay of the week. So, the Ravens had a hand in sinking that one. That was Ravens, 49ers, and Seahawks money lines. Seahawks, man, not winning that game against the Raiders. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But, looking forward to getting back with the parlays. We got the underdog parlays of the week coming up later. We got the parlays of the week. We got the 7-point teaser of the week. We are red hot on the teasers. I'll say that. So if nothing else, we could fall back on the fact that we are a successful teaser podcast.
Yeah, and you know what, you're doing a lot of the heavy lifting on that particular facet of it. I've not really dabbled in the teaser game a whole lot, but you've got an eye for it. It's clear.
Yeah, I sure do. Nick Teaser Whalen is back at it again here in week 13. But John, let's start firing through these games. We'll do our usual exercise, which lines are a little too high and a little too low. And I'm going to start out right here. We're looking at BetMGM, of course. The Jaguars, they are now 1-point dogs. That line has moved quite a bit. It shifted 2 points in the last 24 hours. The Jags were 1-point favorites most of the week here. And to me, that was not correct. I'm glad that it swung back the other way, but I still feel like these are 2 very equal teams. I think Detroit is seemingly being punished for losing that game to Buffalo, although I think that's still a very good Bills team. That's a game that they should have won. And the Jaguars, in many ways, were very, very lucky to beat the Baltimore Ravens, as we laid out. That is not something that the Jaguars can be counted on to do, to convert those late drives the way that they did. So to me, even though the Jags are now back to being 1-point dogs, I still think this could be Detroit 2, maybe even the standard 2.5.
Yeah, this one's really tricky because it all boils down to how much you believe last week's result from Jacksonville and whether they can carry that over to this week. We know the Detroit defense isn't getting fixed this season, really. So it really comes down to, can Trevor Lawrence and company take advantage of it? Can Travis Etienne get back out there? Hopefully he can. Although Jermichael Hasty, he was good pass catcher out of the backfield last week.
They got Darrell Henderson too, if they want. He was inactive last week, so they do have options. But we should say Etienne limited on Wednesday, limited again on Thursday. I'm getting the feeling that he's going to play. I just don't know if he's going to be 100%.
Right. They kept showing him on the sidelines during the broadcast last week, and it was very frustrating. They're like, he might, but he was never medically cleared to
return.
Right. Yeah. It was just strange situation, but regardless, on the Detroit side, how they attack this defense, I think it is a fairly attackable defense. I think that's why we see the total checking in as high as it is. I'm going to stick to my gut here, though, and I'm going to kind of double down in the belief that Trevor Lawrence is here and he's here to stay. And I think that this just kind of is a continuation of last week. I think they carry over the fourth quarter success from last week. And this clearly could be that letdown spot. You can't really trust the Jaguars to carry it yet, but this is me betting that they buck the trend and they go ahead and string a couple of wins together here. So I do like Jacksonville even still.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. For me, there's always kind of the emotional hedge. Like I have to factor that in when I make my line for this game. That I just never trust the Jaguars. Like they would have to string together probably 20 straight wins for me to really be like, all right, I think we might be able to trust this team now. And Detroit, they seem to have found something, right? These 3 games, even before Thanksgiving Day, they beat Green Bay, Chicago, and the New York Giants in back-to-back weeks. None of those are overly strong opponents, but I think this was a 1-6 team, after that loss to Miami in week 8. And I think we had kind of left them for dead at that point, and they at least have turned a corner. And this defense, you're right, it's beyond repair, I think, for this year. They've just been a devastating defense really the entire season, but it seems to have, it's gotten incrementally better, right? Like I thought they were the better team for 90 to 95% of that game against the Buffalo Bills. So I don't know. I think there's maybe the final result of that game seems like it has too much of an influence on this line for me. What are some lines that stand out to you as a little too high?
As far as the lines that are too high are concerned, I felt like the Ravens. I think that, not to belabor all the points on our two teams here, but I just don't trust the Ravens with that big of a line. I know it's the Broncos, so that's like the ultimate, test of that statement. But the Broncos, they have a good defense. This is going to be a low scoring game. The Ravens just don't seem to be able to get out of their own way on offense. I saw a great tweet from Jonas Schaefer, covers the Ravens for the Baltimore Sun, with this graph. Most snaps taken with 3 seconds or less on the play clock, and the Ravens are just lapping the field with that. So I don't know if it's a Roman issue. I don't know if it's a Lamar issue. I don't know what it is exactly, but that's inexcusable. Like there's something to be said for if you want to be the team that's bleeding the clock down, but they're doing that in the first quarter. They're getting delays of game. Like it's so maddening to watch. So they can't get out of their own way, and the Denver defense is tough. So I think that this is a low-scoring slog. I don't think the Ravens lose here. I don't think. But I have a very hard time seeing them winning this one comfortably with the 2 scores that would be required for them to cover this 8.5 number. So I'm out on the Ravens at that. I'm worried about the Seahawks a little bit, just because they're a little bit volatile. Maybe I'm a little bit shook from that Raiders game. And again, right. I mean, that was insane. And then, on the other side of it, similar to what I was saying about the Broncos, where it's like, okay, you can make this statement about their opponent, but we're still talking about Team X. And with the Rams, they're toast. They're beyond toast. I put the Simpsons clip in my article where Homer's like, they suck. They're the suckiest bunch of sucks that have ever sucked. Like that is how I feel about the Rams. But the Seahawks, maybe Geno, does he have his first truly bad game of the season this year? I think just betting them for more than a touchdown feels a little bit icky. I'm gonna do it, but it just feels a little bit high. And then I felt like the Steelers should not be road favorites as well. That was my other one. I know that there's kind of like some differing at sportsbooks who can't be named. They have it flipped, so that one is kind of busting my brain as well.
Yeah, over at BetMGM, Steelers have been holding steady for most of the week as -1 on the road. I actually like the Steelers in that game. I would prefer that it be flipped for value purposes. I locked up the Steelers in staff picks this week. I'm not quite sure who I'll be locking up on this pod yet. I want to talk through some things with you before I lock anything in. It's been dangerous, kind of pre-locking these the last couple of weeks. So I'm trying to take a slightly different approach here. But I think Kenny Pickett has made some strides. I still don't think he's anything better than like the 20th best quarterback in the league in any given week. But I thought he looked like the better quarterback compared to Matt Ryan on Monday Night Football. That is a very low bar, I understand. But he was efficient. That they're using him on design runs a little bit more. He had 2 within the red zone that I really liked. That's part of the strength that you get with Kenny Pickett. And he has great chemistry with Pat Freiermuth. He's developing great chemistry with George Pickens. I thought that that game was probably a little bit closer than it should have been. Like if the Colts don't have that kick return coming out of the second half, I think that was a game that it looked like Pittsburgh was maybe poised to run away with. And I know a lot of the metrics don't love the Steelers. I mean, offensively, that's totally legit. Defensively, it's like, I just don't think you could judge this team with all the injuries, especially to TJ Watt. And TJ Watt didn't even do that much against the Colts. But I think when he's back, this is a completely different defense. They play a completely different style. And you just have that Mike Tomlin infrastructure. And look, I know the Falcons played a competitive game against the Commanders. They probably should have won that game, if not for that late interception. But, if you just look at it as Steelers defense versus Marcus Mariota, I don't really care about the location of the game. That is the side of the matchup I want to be on.
So I was fortunate enough to watch that Monday night game on the airplane. I was really having a time watching Matt Ryan warm up with the plyo balls and everything, trying to get the obliques loose for his just abysmal performance where they had like no yards in the first quarter or something like that. Good stuff, Matty Ice. But let's see, where was I going with that? But as far as they said on the broadcast that the Steelers represented 43% of the crowd in Indianapolis. It could be higher this week in Atlanta. Oh, yeah. Atlanta's a very the doors are open. You're welcome to come on down here if you're a Steelers fan. I fear so. Like this could be like 50-50 or maybe even slightly majority in favor of the Steelers. So it could legitimately feel like something close to a home game for Pittsburgh. So yeah, home field for the Falcons in this one completely out the window. And yeah, to your point, I mean, TJ Watt maybe didn't wreck things last week, but he did look good against the Bengals. I thought so. Like I'm not doubting that he can like turn in one of those game wrecker type performances against a bad offensive line. It's all making sense. Basically, the rationale to me for the Falcons is just turning Kenny Pickett over essentially. But I think, your point's well taken where Pickett looks like maybe the ceiling's not super high, but maybe you can't really count on him to screw the game up for them as much as you could earlier this year.
One major thing we're watching on the Pittsburgh side, Najee Harris has not practiced in back-to-back days. So we'll see. I mean, they haven't ruled him out. It sounds like that oblique injury is not quite as severe as it may have first appeared, but he could still miss a game or two in the short term. Benny Snell also on the injury report, but they do have Jaylen Warren back this week. That is huge. I actually thought both Snell and McFarland ran pretty well in the second half of that game. And even before Harris went out, they were doing a good job kind of getting both of those secondary backs involved. So it's certainly a drop-off if you don't have Najee Harris, but it doesn't really change the overall calculus for me. I think, like I said, I want that Steelers defense as the number one unit in that game. We'll get more into Seattle in a little bit. The last 2 weeks have just been really rough for me as a true believer in the Seahawks. They go to Germany, lay that egg against Tampa Bay, and then allow the Raiders to rack up almost 600 yards of offense last week. But I want to go to Commanders-Giants real quickly. Should the Commanders be 2.5-point favorites on the road here? Do we trust the Commanders in this spot? Because this is a decent amount of respect, even against a banged-up Giants team.
So I'm an interesting source to ask on this one because I might believe way too much in this Commanders team. It's not like they've been racking up impressive wins of late. And like you alluded to, that they really could have and probably should have lost to the Falcons last week, if not for that vintage Marcus Mariota moment there at the goal line. But I love Taylor Heineke, and I also think that the Giants, their descent back to earth, when they were just getting way more than they should have been earlier in the season. At one point, were they 5-2 or 6-2? I mean, it was way over what they should have been, record-wise. So I think the Commanders can go up there and do it. I think I've cited this interesting little trend in my article where I believe the Commanders are 4-2 against the spread on the road, and the Giants are 4-2 against the spread at home. So it's a unstoppable force versus a immovable object type of situation that we got going on here. But I give the edge at quarterback to Taylor Heineke. I really do, over Daniel Jones. I'm a firm believer in that. And, we'll have to see what's up with Antonio Gibson. It seems like Brian Robinson can at least give them enough in the run game. And Terry McLaurin is going to be a big problem for that Giants secondary. And then, as far as the Giants go, they need Saquon Barkley to get going. I think that this Washington run defense has really bowed up in recent weeks. And I feel like that if they slow him down, then they win this one. I'm thinking, anywhere between 4 to a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, that's how they've kind of been grinding them out. Like it felt like they should have lost last week, and yet they still covered in that game against Atlanta. And we'll see if Chase Young ends up coming back. That would obviously be a boost to that defense. If he does come back, I would imagine that the snap count would be fairly limited. But I mean, that defensive front, for Washington might be the best in the league. With the Commanders and the Giants, like neither of these teams really have a ton of impressive wins. Like the Giants beat Tennessee in week 1, but it felt fluky at the time and kind of continues to look that way in retrospect. And, meanwhile, the Commanders have won 6 out of 7. The win over the Eagles, that's the big one. But as we discussed at length on this pod at the time, multiple fumbles, everything was going Washington's way in the second half of that game. They tacked on the touchdown on the final play to make it look more lopsided than it was. The other wins in that span are Atlanta, Houston, Indy, Green Bay, and the Chicago Bears. So I kind of think these teams are really equal. I think to me this would be a pick 'em, but again, maybe it's the injuries on the Giants side that push you toward the Commanders.
No, that totally fair point. But I guess my sort of counterpoint is that a good team doesn't lose against those teams. So they've been winning. So they haven't had those letdown moments. I thought it was a big test for them to be able to go into Houston after that Eagles game and take care of business as it were. So there's something brewing there. Maybe I drank too much tap water when I was home in Montgomery County, Maryland last week, but I'm in on this Commanders team right now.
Well, I mean, I'm with you. I'm taking the Commanders. I just don't feel that great about it. Like I said, I think these are very equal teams. I think no result would really surprise me here. And, you mentioned the Texans. The Commanders took care of business against the Texans. The Giants technically did as well, but did not look great in that game. That's their only win in their last 5 weeks. They had a bye in there. They've looked outright bad, against Dallas, Detroit, and Seattle in those 3 losses. So, if nothing else, the Commanders at least are coming into this game with confidence. Whereas with the Giants, it feels like one more loss in this season, which started so promising. They were 7-2 at one point, 6-1. It seemed so promising. It seemed like they were coasting toward a wild card berth. And, these teams have kind of had opposite seasons. I feel like that when we get to week 17 or 18, I think we're going to look at the Giants as this team that started hot and faded. And we might look at the Commanders as a team that started 1-5 and has had the complete flip-flop as the Giants. Let's go to the other side of this. Lines that are a little too low.
All right. Too low. Let's see here. I think that, well, this one is tricky. I want to say that the Chargers are too low, but time and time again, the Chargers just play down to their level of competition or up to it. That they always give the Chiefs a good run for their money, but they'll turn around and barely squeak one out against the Cardinals, who I saw some crazy stat about their home record over the last couple of years. I think they have like 8 home wins combined over the last 3 seasons or something. They
win a calendar year without winning a home game.
My Lord. I mean, that is just inexcusable. So I feel like on paper, the Chargers should take care of business against this Raiders team, but I don't feel uber comfortable with it. And, the lines are tough every week. This week has been particularly difficult to sort out. Like this one is screaming at me. And then this Eagles one, it's moved so much over the course of this week to where, it was 6.5 and now we're looking at Eagles -4.5. And I think that they're, similar to the Commanders and the Giants. Like these are 2 teams that have been very good against the number where these games are being played, where the Titans have been just total road warriors over the course of this entire season. The Eagles have been, outside of that Washington game, really tough to take down at home. I mean, obviously, but even against the number. So I feel like there might, for as much as I've just bang the drum for saying the Titans aren't getting enough respect, I do wonder if they're getting a little bit too much respect when it's 4.5.
Well, if we know anything about the Titans, they're going to keep it close against just about everybody. And the anomaly, of course, is that week 2 blowout against Buffalo, where it felt like that game was over 5 minutes in. But other than that, I mean, do you feel more confident about any team that, like, they go into Kansas City and go to overtime with Malik Willis at quarterback? I know this is going to be a close game, so I'm fine with the line moving down a little bit. And Philadelphia's looked a little bit shaky of late. That defense, like Green Bay, piled up 30 points. On Sunday Night Football this past week. But I still like the Eagles here. Like, as much as I respect Tennessee, like at some point you have to actually win a game against a good opponent, right? Like they're another one of those teams that all of their wins this season have come against the Raiders, Colts, Commanders, Colts, Texans, Broncos, and Packers. They do not have a high quality win right now. They have a bunch of quality losses. They might have more quality losses than any team. So if you're talking just straight up picks, I like the Eagles here, but you could totally see this game playing out very similarly to last week against Cincinnati, where Cincinnati wins that game, but they only win it by 4. So I think we're at kind of a dangerous number here with Philly.
Yeah, we're certainly there. I definitely get it. And on the Eagles side, if they're just able to slow down Derrick Henry, and that looks like Jordan Davis might be back, so that certainly helps slow things down in the middle. If he doesn't get going, I'm not expecting Ryan Tannehill to do what he did to the Packers, which is kind of how that game played out, where, yes, Derrick Henry was slowed, relatively speaking, but Tannehill threw for 330. Like, I don't think that other shoe drops in this spot if Derrick Henry gets slowed down. So as with any Titans game, like that's the start and end of the conversation, is just, how does Derrick Henry do?
I want to go back to Raiders Chargers, which is just an upsetting matchup if you're trying to bet this game. Like, the Raiders, I tried so hard to leave them for dead. Now here they are going full Lazarus these last 2 weeks. Over under for this game sitting at around 50.5, 51 at some unnamed books. I think it is going to be a high scoring game. I think that's just kind of the type of games that the Raiders are going to play from here on out. This is a bad defense, but the offense, big play potential is there. It was certainly there last week. I think they took advantage of a Seattle defense that's been trending in the wrong direction these last couple of weeks. And we've had some major line movement over the last few days. We're seeing the Raiders now as 1 point home favorites. They were 2.5 point home dogs, John, as recently as 2 days ago.
Wow. So right. So like when I was doing my column, like Chargers favored narrowly, but favored. And yeah, now things have flipped around. So wow, that's I guess that makes me feel even stronger about the Chargers, as queasy as that makes me feel. And not to completely copy the Titans game analysis, but if Josh Jacobs isn't cooking the way that he was a week ago, then I think the Chargers have a good shot here. But I don't think that the Chargers defense has really shown an ability to stop the run in any sort of way that makes you think that Josh Jacobs is going to do anything less than like maybe 100 yards, and that could end up being a problem, especially when Devontae Adams is playing as well as he is as well. You got a complete offense that you have to contend with if you're the Chargers. So really, I'm just kind of hanging my hopes on one Justin Herbert to just find a way and defeat the dumb decisions that Brandon Staley will make.
That's how I feel. It's like, do I trust Derek Carr more or do I trust Justin Herbert more? I'm going to take Justin Herbert 10 out of 10 times in that matchup. And it's a shame that he plays for the Chargers, because just by virtue of being associated with that franchise, it means that this game is going to be chaotic. I wrote in Beating the Book, which you could find over at rotowire.com, that I expect this game to end on either like a blocked extra point return for a touchdown, maybe like an extra point that bounces off the crossbar, bounces all the way back 120 yards the other way and goes through the opposite goalpost to give 3 points to the other team. I think that's how that would work. Like, there will be major hijinks in this game, no matter what side you're on. You are not going to be able to sit still. I don't think. And we should mention, by the way, Josh Jacobs might not even play in this game. He was limited on Wednesday. We haven't got a practice report on him since then. Almost didn't play last week against Seattle. Obviously, he ended up being just fine, but he did say he tweaked his calf injury during that huge day against Seattle. So if Josh Jacobs doesn't play, to me, there's a pretty big drop off going from a guy who's literally the number one back in fantasy in standard leagues and half point PPR to like Zamir White and Amir Abdullah. Like that to me would make me feel better, significantly better about the Chargers winning this game. But it also sounds like Mike Williams not trending in the right direction for the Chargers. It's unfortunately, I see this game playing out very similarly to last week's Seattle Vegas game. Like, I think it might just be like last team with the ball wins.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to chalk it up. So my question to you, who gets the ball last?
Well, hopefully it's the Chargers, because I can assure you that's the side that I will be on here. And I dug up the stat. We always, like, all year I've been saying no team has killed me more than the Raiders. I know that for a fact. I feel like I'm like 0 for 12 on the Raiders so far this year. Teams are 1-10 straight up after playing the Raiders this season. So that would imply that Seattle is in major trouble this week, which I don't think they are. I think the Rams are a complete shell of themselves, and we'll dive more into that game in a little bit. But it's not a good omen, that's for sure. And it definitely plays into my theory that the Raiders, whenever you play them, they trick you. Like, if the Raiders beat you, that's a big time alarm bell situation. If you lose to the Raiders, you're probably losing the next week. But if you beat the Raiders, it also tricks people into thinking you're a good team. And then more often than not, you're going ahead and losing the next week. Like, they're just the team that's been wrecking everything for me.
Have you seen the movie buff that you are? Have you ever seen the movie It Follows?
I have no idea what that is. Never heard of it.
Okay. The premise is something happens, and then you basically get haunted by this ghost until you effectively pass it on to the next team. So that basically is what the Raiders are this year. Yes. They are the it follows spirit.
Yeah, I mean, you said I'm a movie buff. I am not a movie buff. Just to be clear to anybody listening, I'm the opposite of a movie buff. But I'll trust you on that one. That sounds like it makes a lot of sense. I want to throw out the Minnesota Vikings as a team, and I think this line could maybe be a little bit higher. They're playing at home for the 5th time in 6 weeks. It feels like every game is at home this season for the Vikings. They're 3-point favorites, so they're getting what? I mean, it's a real home field advantage there. It's still probably getting a half point on a neutral, you're assuming, against this Jets team. I respect the hell out of the Jets defense. I'll say that. I think everybody does. I as good as Mike White looked last week, I think if I'm Zach Wilson, sitting on the sidelines with my hoodie up, looking all vindictive the entire game, I'm thinking, look, I could have done this against the Bears defense. This might be the worst defense in the league. Are we putting too much stock into Mike White playing really well against a really, really bad defense?
Probably. I think it just needs to be established that just how bad this Bears defense is. I don't think that's quite getting discussed enough within like the context of Mike White's big game last week. And obviously Mike White famous for his Bengals game last year, but you also look at his box scores and you remember, oh yeah, he also had that 4 interception game with no touchdowns. And it's like, that's a little bit more like it. So I think the Jets are a team that if they just get baseline decent quarterback play, they can beat almost anybody. And they've proven that time and time again. When Zach Wilson hasn't screwed up, they've been able to reel off impressive wins at the time against the Packers and of course against the Bills. I do think that we're skating on thin ice with Mike White in the sense that you look at his advanced numbers, under 6 yard depth of throw. So all of a sudden, you're not going to be sneaking up on the Vikings with that game plan the way that you were with the Bears. And the Vikings are going to be able to just kind of start creeping down towards the line, making a lot of traffic there in the throwing lanes that Mike White likes to go to. And all of a sudden, this becomes a huge issue for the Jets, and we're back to square one where they're saddled with a horrific quarterback performance, and therefore that they lose to a quality Vikings team. This one is definitely hard. I think that I ultimately think that there's just enough magic left in Mike White to make this happen, to trust the Jets in this spot. But boy, it's that's one that I'm going to be agonizing over all the way up until Sunday.
At 3, to me, it's a stay away. If it got to Vikings 3.5, maybe I would jump on the Jets. If it got, went down to Vikings 2.5, I would be happy to take Minnesota at home. And look, I don't want to believe in the Vikings as much as anybody. Look, they're still they're back over. They're back over. What do you call it? I guess they're in positive territory in terms of point differential now after last week's win. So at least they have that going for them. They still do have a worse point differential than the Jaguars. I continue to spread that message to as many people as who will listen. But, they also put up 33 points on what some metrics say is one of the 3 best defenses in the league last week against the Pats. And of course, you're also saying, well, they did let Mac Jones throw for almost 400 yards. It's the first time all year that Mac Jones has looked anything like that. So you do have questions about that Vikings pass defense for sure. But at the same time, I also feel like they have a cheat code at receiver in Justin Jefferson. And I don't even know how to value this guy anymore. I think, when Cooper Kupp is healthy, when Jamar Chase is healthy, Stephon Diggs, those guys, Devontae Adams, they're all in the same neighborhood. I don't think Jefferson is on his own tier, but in terms of the contested catches that he's making downfield, he is in a league of his own this year. I mean, it is unbelievable. He had 2 just monster bailout catches on, those have to be 20% completion to anyone else in the league. And for him, you feel like it's 90%.
Yeah. And, it's a continuation of, the Bills play, of course, the most famous one. Yeah, it's wild. That's his trump card with as far as his, particular superpower at receiver. He's just unreal. He's great at everything else, but that kind of is the icing on the cake, as it were. And, you'd like to see the Vikings not be so monochromatic when it comes to their passing game. You'd like to see, those other weapons get a little bit more involved here, so it's not all Jefferson. But what I think we're in for film guys are going to really enjoy the Sauce Gardner Justin Jefferson matchup. I could see this one resulting in some serious jawing as the game goes on, as they go to battle so many times.
What do you think of the total in this game? Sitting at 44 right now at BetMGM. I think that's about right. Obviously a lot of respect for this Jets defense. I don't necessarily see this as a spot where Minnesota or obviously the Jets are approaching 30 points. I mean, implied score, something like, 21, 24, something in that range. Like that seems about right.
Yeah, this was, again, a tough one to get a handle on. I believe I took the over just because, again, I think that Mike White can just do it one more time and, get Garrett Wilson, get Elijah Moore going. And, they end up putting up enough points on their point. And, the Vikings, I think their offense will kind of win the matchup against the Jets, probably for the most part, enough to where, we see this one total be like 47, something like that.
Yeah. Christian Darrisaw for the Minnesota Vikings did not practice on Wednesday. He's still in concussion protocol. Looks like probably 50-50 at best. They very quickly ruled him out of last week's game. Of course, that was on a short week coming out of their previous game, but no Darrisaw. That would be a little bit scary. I think if you're looking at that Vikings offensive line. We both lost our best bets last week, John. We were upfront about it at the top of the pod. I was on Seattle. That was crushing. So many chances. It felt like they had to close out that game. Of course, you lose it on like a almost 90-yard run by Josh Jacobs in overtime. I was beside myself at that Seattle defense. That to me felt like a rough one. I've had some just outright bad picks. This is not one that I felt all that bad about. I really thought Seattle was the right side in that one, and they put up 30 points, and it wasn't enough.
And to be fair to you, that it made all the sense in the world to go with Seattle at home in that spot. I felt a little bit less conviction on that one. I really wanted to, people really love to see the drama between us. So I felt like going with the Ravens. What was the play? I did feel confident that the Ravens were going to do it. Like, if I were to redo that best bet, like I probably am still going with Baltimore. And it looked good for a decent chunk of that game, even if Baltimore, for its own part, didn't. They still had the 9-point lead in the fourth quarter, for crying out loud. So it should have come in. It just simply did not. I do feel better about mine for this week, but we will of course tackle that later. But if I may do the honors, may I? Yeah,
you want to lead us off? You want to go every other?
Yes, we'll trade off yet again. I will take the first at bat here. Kick off week 13 of the NFL season with the king of sportsbooks. Sign up with BetMGM using bonus code BETROTO. That's BETROTO. And your first wager is risk-free up to $1,000. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions.
Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Puerto Rico, Tennessee, Virginia, Washington, D.C., West Virginia, Wyoming, or Ontario only. You must be 21 years or older to wager. However, if you are in Ontario, you only have to be 19 or older.
Not bad. New customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable free bets or site credit. Free bets expire 7 days from issuance. Excludes our guys, the Michigan Disassociated Persons. Please gamble responsibly.
Do you have a gambling problem? If so, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado, D.C., Kansas, Louisiana, Nevada, Wyoming, or Virginia.
1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan, 1-800-GAMBLER in Indiana, Maryland, New Jersey, or West Virginia, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Call or text the Tennessee Red Line at 800-889-9789 in Tennessee, or call 1-888-777-9696 in Mississippi.
In Ontario, if you have questions or concerns about your gambling or someone close to you, please contact Connects Ontario at 1-866-531-2600 to speak to an advisor free of charge. Sports betting is void in Georgia, Hawaii, Ohio, and Utah, and other states where prohibited. Promotional offers not available in Nevada and New York. All right, man. We got to get off the schneid this week. with the best bets. We're not going 0 for 2. It cannot happen. I'm not letting it happen.
No, we're locked in. We've been back in the lab. If anything, we're our own harshest critics. Like we both want to get off the schneid here. It'll be interesting to see how we handle this when we both hit our best bets next week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was at the gym, this past week, I brought up my picks on my phone. Kind of use those as motivation. I set them down. I'm trying to keep an eye on them. Get one extra rep in there. Like you said, we're not. Nobody's pushing harder than we are behind the scenes. That is for
Indianapolis.
Sure.
What was I thinking?
Exactly. All right, let's get back to week 13, man. I kind of just want to go up and down the board as usual. We touched on about half of the games. We'll check back in on a few that we want to go deeper on. We'll hit on the rest of the games that we have not mentioned. Let's go to Packers Bears. And if you've been clued in this week, you'll notice that this line has also been on the move. It ticked down a full point in the last couple hours in favor of the Chicago Bears. It was sitting at Green Bay -4.5 on the road, now down to 3.5 with the news that Justin Fields put in a full practice on Thursday.
That's huge. We saw what the Eagles offense looked like against Green Bay last week. I know that there's a big history here with Aaron Rodgers and his ownership stake in the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field, but with Fields coming back, that offense, they do lose Darnell Mooney. That's tough. But, you made the trade for Chase Claypool. If Justin Fields is ready to go, then you also have Cole Kmet. This is tricky. This is really, really tricky. And it's not like on the other side that the Packers are, the picture of health at quarterback. So for as many questions as you might have about how effective is Justin Fields, how effective is Aaron Rodgers going to be? It not only was the thumb just killing him clearly these last few weeks and notably on Sunday night, but then he picks up the core injury as well. It's like, oh boy, I all of a sudden, with Fields potentially being back and seeing the kind of problems that a strong run game presented for the Green Bay Packers last week, I'm very, very interested in the Bears. And I think this line movement is very telling.
Yeah, and we should note, Aaron Rodgers is still technically questionable, limited at practice on Thursday. That's been the case with each passing week. I fully expect Rodgers to play. I would be shocked if he doesn't. He's been open about it, saying, look, if we're still mathematically in the hunt, I want to play. And Matt LaFleur seems to be completely on the same page with Rodgers. And I still think we're going to see a minimum of probably 2 Jordan Love starts at the end of the year. Green Bay is one more loss from the mathematical stuff just being out the window. I think Rodgers is cognizant of how, in some ways, strangely closely, this is tracking to the Favre Rodgers dynamic, from 15 years ago. And I think, he's kind of trying to play both sides where he's like, look, I still want to play. I was the MVP each of the last 2 years. I haven't fallen off a cliff, but I also think he doesn't want to be viewed in the same way that Brett Favre was when his career was coming to an end in Green Bay, where he just wanted no part of kind of grooming the future. So it's a tough situation. Again, I think we see Rodgers in this game. Fair to question how limited he'll be outdoors at Chicago. Not the easiest environment, although for Aaron Rodgers, it has been. So I still like Green Bay in this game, even with Fields, dealing with a shoulder injury specifically. I know it's his non-throwing shoulder, but he did say, earlier this week, it was still affecting him, obviously throwing with his right hand being his left shoulder. I have much more questions about him as the runner. These last couple of weeks, more so than they were early in the season, they've been using him in these designed runs, kind of Jalen Hurtsian between the tackles, QB draws, things like that. He's still very capable, of course, of dropping back and making things happen in a scramble drill situation. But I don't know that he's going to be quite as confident, lowering that shoulder, something that really is a huge piece of what's made him, one of the big breakouts this season. So Justin Fields playing, yes, it's an upgrade over Trevor Siemian, who is also on the injury report with an oblique injury. If Fields didn't play, we might have been looking at Tim Boyle starting for the Bears. That obviously would have been fantastic for Green Bay.
Sleeper cell.
I still like Green Bay here. It's so hard because the Packers, it feels like some of their best offensive games this year have come in losses. I thought the offense played pretty well against Buffalo. I thought it played really well at times this past week against Philly. And because they lose those games, I think it just becomes, Green Bay, there's another loss. They continue to free fall. But they do at least seem to have figured some things out offensively. Like A.J. Dillon, for example, did the unthinkable and got in the end zone in the last game. That was his first touchdown since week 1. I thought that was the best he's ran the ball all year. And with Christian Watson rolling, they actually do have some big play potential, which that to me is what was really, really missing from this team early on.
So I don't know if you do this as well, but I caught myself doing it on Sunday night when AJ Dillon was finishing runs, like just involuntarily. I'm just making the Chris Berman sound. I'm just.
What?
It's just that I mean, it just shades of Mike Allstott dance through my head as he's just plowing through a couple of fellas. So yeah, AJ Dillon, so fun to watch. But no, I think your point is well taken as it goes with Fields, because I think a lot of the times we brush off if it's a non-throwing shoulder for a quarterback, but Fields is not your run of the mill stand back in the pocket type of quarterback. Like the reason why the Bears have been having any sort of pulse on offense has been because he's been getting out in the open field and gashing teams on the ground. So if he's reluctant to do that, then maybe there's an overcorrection in this line at that point.
And you mentioned no Darnell Mooney for the Bears. That's huge. Also no Eddie Jackson on that defense. Like that, this was already a horrific defense. You take Eddie Jackson away, I mean, he was probably the best remaining player on that unit. I think Green Bay is going to be able to put up points. It's just a matter of whether that Green Bay rush defense, which was historically bad last week against the Eagles, that they gave up the second most yards in a game this decade on the ground to the Philadelphia Eagles. And part of me thinks this has just not been a good Green Bay defense. They're just so badly schemed week to week. But at the same time, you're not going to have that type of anomaly performance 2 weeks in a row. So I think we're going to know early on, like if Green Bay comes out and goes 3 and out on its first 2 drives, I think we're going to have ourselves a game. But if the Packers come out confident, maybe they get 10 points on those first 2 drives. I actually think this is a spot where they could kind of quietly roll on the road, even with Justin Fields in the lineup for the Bears. Jags Lions, we talked about, don't need to dig into that one too much more. Browns Texans, how about it? Cleveland 7-point favorites on the road at Houston. I actually think this line is correct. I'm not all that high on the Browns in this spot. I took Houston in staff picks. I believe we had it at 7.5 at that time, so that made it a little bit easier. I really think there's a chance that Deshaun Watson struggles here. It's going to be exactly 700 days on Sunday since he last started an NFL game. He had very limited action in the preseason. I know he's been ramping up behind the scenes these last couple of weeks, but to me, it's completely unrealistic to expect 2020 NFL MVP candidate Deshaun Watson to just be that guy stepping in this situation.
I think so too. And I don't think that the parallel is right on with this. But could you see, shades of like the Russell Wilson game out in Seattle to start the year? I know that Houston, they're at a point in their season where maybe the home crowd isn't going to be quite as rowdy, and they never are as rowdy as the folks up in Seattle. And, with that being a Monday night game, new season and everything, that it obviously made things tough for Russell Wilson. I don't know if it's going to play out the same way, but I could certainly see some struggles there. And I think that, in a more concrete football sense, I think the rust is going to be a factor. Like, I think the Browns are going to be able to be kind of a spoiler team here down the stretch once Watson gets himself into rhythm, but I'm not banking on it necessarily happening in his first game back. That's a long layoff. And I know the Texans are the Texans and they're very, very bad, but I still have a hard time trusting the Browns with this number. That's a number that I could understand if like we had a start or two under Watson's belt this year, but not in his first game back.
Right. I think there's some extra juice here because it is Houston specifically, given the history with Watson. But if you throw that out, like I don't see the Browns losing this game, even if Watson just doesn't look anything like his former self. I don't even know if it matters. Like the Texans are really, really bad. And, Nick Chubb and this offensive line going up against that Texans defense, to me, that's just such a huge mismatch that I don't think Cleveland's going to ask Deshaun Watson to win this game for them. I think you kind of bring him back and do a little bit of a soft launch, if you will, on the road this week. Like the Texans are a really rough team. I mean, it's going to be Brandon Allen again at quarterback. This has not been a great Cleveland defense, but hard not to feel good about that matchup. I almost feel like this game is going to push against the spread. Like if it holds at 7, I think the Browns win this game like 23-16. Like I don't see it being a blowout. I don't think the Texans get embarrassed. I don't think the Browns are really capable of doing that right now, but I also just I can't find a reason to say the Texans could win this game outright. Like that just doesn't seem possible.
No, there would have to be some crazy stuff that happens. There would have to be like a pick six or two for the Texans to win this one outright. So it takes some fluky stuff, but yeah, I think your summation, it makes sense. I could see this one falling right at 7.
Got one more Texan stat to throw at you, by the way. They have scored 17 total points in the first quarter this season. 17.
Seems like not enough. So Lovie Smith, not a fast starter.
No, exactly. It seems like they're playing from behind every week, and yeah, that does check out. That is in fact
they
the case.
are.
Jets Vikings. We dug into that one pretty deeply. I think we could move on there. Same with Commanders Giants. Let's go to Seattle and the Rams. I do want to return to that one real quickly. I'll give a little tease here. Literally, this will be part of the teaser of the week. So be prepared for that. I'm starting to feel the same way about the Rams as I do the Texans in some ways, where like you could say that, Seattle's had 2 major letdowns. Like this could be another spot for that, but I just think the Rams are depleted to the point where it's really hard for them to win football games. We don't expect Matthew Stafford to play in this one. He's currently doubtful. That they haven't gone as far as to rule him out, but I'm going to say it right now. He's not going to play. Cooper Kupp is on IR. Allen Robinson is on IR. That they're banged up at virtually every position on offense. And, Aaron Donald now not going to play in this game. So, I mean, how many blue chippers are they down to? Is it just Jalen Ramsey at this point? Do we count Bobby Wagner?
And that's all they had. Like, that's the thing about the Rams, like the most top heavy team in the NFL. It is like stars and scrubs. It looks like a salary cap draft or something in a fantasy context. Like that, they're just trying to hope that their star players can just lift up the rest of just a bunch of like $1 type of guys at the end of the draft. I mean, it's hideous. What they've built, they've kind of just paid the piper. That they pushed all their chips in the middle of the table for last year's run. Worked out, but there's a downside to just eschewing the NFL draft at a certain point, and your roster construction, your depth really takes a hit, especially when those star players are hurt or underperforming or both, and that's what we have with the Rams.
The look ahead on this, by the way, back at like ahead of week 1, Rams 9.5.
Yeah.
So what is that, like a 16.5 point swing?
Ooh, nice math.
Yeah, I don't even know if that's correct. Don't check me on that, but it was 8.5 in favor of Seattle earlier in the week. Has come down a little bit. I am okay with that. I think part of it is, the Rams getting some timely / lucky stops. I think last week against Kansas City, I mean, that game should have been significantly more lopsided. Although, Bryce Perkins did throw a couple of picks in the second half that maybe prevented a couple of field goals by the Rams. There's such a limited team. I think they're one of the very few teams right now that has accepted their fate. They know they're cooked, and I think they're just kind of just want to run out the clock on this season. So I like Seattle -7. I mean, again, it's not the greatest number to grab them at, but it's not even about me feeling good about the Seahawks, because they haven't given us a whole lot to feel good about, especially defensively these last couple of weeks. We know for a fact the Rams cannot exploit it.
No, they can't. They're playing out the string. The season's over for them. I don't know if playing a divisional foe could even provide a spark for them at this stage, even at home.
No. And look, we should say they won the Super Bowl last year, so they're fine. I think you take that trade off. You'll take a down year after winning a Super Bowl. I think there's like 28 other franchises that would be totally fine with that. Dolphins Niners. Talk about burying the lead. I don't even know if we've mentioned this game yet. This is maybe the game I'm most looking forward to the entire year so far. I think this is going to be so much fun, regardless of how it plays out. Dolphins 4-point dogs at San Francisco, total sitting at 46.5. There are just so many, kind of this unit against this unit, coach versus coach, Tua versus that defense. Like I'm having a really tough time kind of pinning down what I think happens. And on top of that, we have major injury questions, especially Christian McCaffrey for the San Francisco 49ers. His status very much up in the air at this point. He did work off to the side at Thursday, which is a slight upgrade over not practicing at all on Wednesday. If Christian McCaffrey doesn't play, things could get a little dicey for San Francisco. And I know that defense has been running red hot these last few weeks. They have not allowed a second half touchdown in 4 straight games. Everybody's heard that stat by now. But the stat that a lot of people are not talking about, the San Francisco 49ers have had a cake schedule this season. And I do think that is part of the reason that this defense looks as good in some of the advanced numbers as it does. It is a very good defense. I'm not saying it's fraudulent, but some of these recent opponents have just been ridiculously bad on offense.
Right. And when they played a good offense, the Chiefs, they struggled. So
they got blown out in the second half, run out of the building. That was at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At the Big Denim. That's all. You got to factor it all in, but I am kind of willing to feel like the Niners, obviously last week didn't look great. They pitched the shutout, but it's against the Saints. So, you take that for what you will, but I'm willing to think that, they're playing on that short week and they're coming off a game at higher than Mile High altitude. I think that there is a bit of a just kind of collective slog that San Francisco was dealing with last week that they won't in this spot. They've obviously probably had this one circled for some time, especially since Miami has, really kind of risen up and established themselves as one of the best teams in the AFC and one of the most explosive offenses in the entire NFL. But the other thing that's been bandied about on the old internet this week is the story from Tua last year, looking at himself in the mirror and asking himself, do I suck? And you know what? I think he's going to be asking himself that again after this game. I love the Niners in this spot.
Ooh.
I don't think that it's great that McCaffrey is injured. And of course, when you have Elijah Mitchell also out, you're talking about guys like Jordan Mason potentially being big factors in that backfield. But maybe, and I know that he was on the injury report earlier this week, but maybe Deebo Samuel gets a little bit more involved in the run game here to kind of help supplement / offset the loss of otherwise backfield production. And I just feel like D'Amico Ryans is going to put Tua in hell this week. I just think that it's just going to be tough. I think that they're going to have a beat on what the Dolphins want to do offensively. And I know at a certain point, speed just wins sometimes, and you have guys like Tyreek and Waddle. So that can certainly happen, but I'm betting against it this time around. Like a lot of the fantasy projections are pretty low on the Dolphins. So if their offense isn't clicking and the Niners are able to just kind of like control clock and hit the occasional big play to Samuel or Ayuk or Kittle, I feel like the Niners kind of put down a little statement win here.
I think if the winning total is 25 points or less, the 49ers win this game.
Yep.
Right. I think it has to be kind of the Dolphins want to play this game in a shootout. And if they are not able to move the ball, it goes without saying that they probably won't win this game. But, I think the same argument that I made for the 49ers, who's, that their last 4 games have come against the Rams, a very banged up Chargers team, the Colt McCoy Cardinals, and then the atrocity that is the Saints offense last week. Like Miami's had a couple soft ones in a row as well. Obviously they're coming off of playing the Texans. So it's going to be a big jump in competition, I think, for both sides. The number one question to me is, without Teron Armstead, can Miami's offensive line hold up? And as soon as Armstead went out last week against the Texans, the answer was a resounding no. Tua was sacked like hard, like 3 times almost immediately. And I think that's a big reason they pulled him out of that game with minutes left in the third quarter, rather than giving him another series or two. And they almost had to put him back in because all of a sudden Houston started moving the ball. That Miami offensive line, like we said, it has not been good all year. You take Armstead away. If Tua is under siege and does not have time to throw, the 49ers will absolutely win this game. And this is another one where I feel like we're going to know right away. Like if Tua is clean for the first drive of the game, I think the Dolphins are going to have some confidence. I think, we haven't even touched on the Shanahan McDaniel element of this. I don't know if there's really, any advantage there, the teacher student dynamic. I think both sides come into this game feeling really good about it though. Like I think the Dolphins firmly believe they're winning this game. And I think San Francisco believes that too. Like I don't think there's any fear on either side. I think the Dolphins look at that San Francisco defense and say, yeah, we could beat these guys. And I think San Francisco looks at Miami and says, this is a finesse team. All they want to do is throw deep across the middle. We'll take that away and we'll be just fine.
Yeah. I mean, that the Armstead point, I think is huge. And also, how tough was the beat if you had the over in that Miami game last week?
30 points at the half.
And under. Oh my goodness. That was a tough scene. But yeah, I think that, this is a toe to toe AFC versus NFC battle. grasshopper versus master, and I'm excited to see how this one plays out. I'm kind of with you where it's number one on my Sunday afternoon power rankings.
Oh, big time. And that's saying a lot because we got Chiefs Bengals in that late window as well. That's the game that most people will see if you mosey over to 506sports.com and you kind of see where all the maps break down. Pretty much everybody's getting Chiefs Bengals. You're gonna have to pull out the second TV and find yourself a stream for Dolphins and Niners. I like the Chiefs in this game a lot. They're 2-point favorites on the road. I much to Jeff's chagrin, laid out my case. He, of course, is a big Bengals fan on the XM show last night. Could Cincinnati win this game? Yes, of course. I'm not saying the Chiefs are going to come in here and blow out Cincinnati. Mahomes is 44-4 in his career in games where the Chiefs lead by at least 14 points at any point. 2 of those 4 losses came to the Bengals in the span of a month last season. So, at least in recent history, no team and no quarterback has really been able to solve Mahomes in the way that Cincy and Joe Burrow have. I just think, and tell me if I'm reading too much into the narrative, because I really don't like doing the narrative-based thing, but this to me reminds me of the Bills coming into Arrowhead earlier this season and beating the Chiefs. That to me felt like a game that Buffalo was going to win, no matter what. Even though they didn't even look like the better team for most of the game, they're like their entire season, like they need to win this game for confidence purposes, for revenge purposes. Like they're not letting themselves lose. This whole year to me has kind of been a Mahomes reminding everybody that he's the best player in the league. And look, he's not a big talker. He's not somebody who's going to, go out and say anything in the media or make it bigger than it needs to be. But damn well he wants to win this game badly. Losing twice to Cincinnati, again, over the span of 30 days last year. This to me kind of feels like a reminder game by Patrick Mahomes, where he's like, I'm not letting us lose.
I mean, that's certainly all on the table. And I think that, Cincinnati, they had that brilliant defensive game plan in the second half of the AFC Championship game last year. And, we're talking about 2 confident sides when we were talking Dolphins, Niners. I mean, who might be more confident right now than the Bengals? You get Jamar Chase back in the fold. You have a guy in Joe Burrow who just doesn't blink. That guy he's just pure steel onions. And, I think them on the other side, they want to show that last year's run was not a fluke, and them going into Tennessee, going into the bad guy's house and taking care of business last week, super, super impressive. So for me, like I definitely understand your case for the Chiefs, and it makes you queasy to go against them. But as road favorites against Cincinnati right now, I do kind of like the Bengals here, actually.
Okay. Well, I like we have a little bit of dissent on the pod. Like I said, I feel strongly about Kansas City showing up for this game for sure. I mean, they are the Chiefs. It's going to be a back and forth game no matter what. And look, it's not like Cincinnati doesn't need this game either, right? Like I don't, the danger when you go down the narrative path is saying that like one team cares more, like implying that the Bengals are just sitting around being like, we could lose this game, no big deal. Like no, they're thinking the same thing. They want to beat the Chiefs for the 3rd time in a row and really, I think, firmly establish themselves as one of the elite teams in the AFC. I will say on the Jamar Chase front, Jeff showed me there was like a 12 tweet thread by some Bengals beat writer. I think it was from The Athletic. And if you look into some of the language that Chase was using, like I think he's going to play in this game, but his quote was, I'm going to take some reps on Sunday. I don't know if we're getting like full bore Jamar Chase. And as Jeff pointed out, he's like, well, maybe that means you're just not using him on like running downs, things like that. Sure. But I don't think it's fair to expect like you're just adding 100% healthy Jamar Chase back into the mix. I do think there's going to be a process of easing him back in.
Yeah, I mean, not an exact parallel because this particular guy hadn't played all year until these spots, but like with George Pickens last year for George's playoff run, they said he'd been ramping up, all this good stuff, but it all amounts to just a couple of snaps in both games against Alabama. He made big plays in both, but the snap count was limited, and you can't just like expect Jamar Chase to go out there and like his only catches be 50-yard touchdown. So that's definitely well said. And then in the other case, what if Joe Mixon is less than 100% to his own part? Like I don't know if Samaje Perine can do the same things. So that's an issue too. But I think that Burrow can still rise to the occasion, and I don't think that he's necessarily hurting for weapons even without Chase, because you do have a guy like T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. Even if Boyd maybe him and Burrow aren't the best match, but Boyd is still a pro's pro at receiver. So we'll see how this goes. And if Cincinnati can replicate the stuff that confused Mahomes the first time around last year, then that it's anyone's game.
Colts Cowboys is our Sunday nighter this week. The NFL graciously deciding not to flex that one out. It is the Cowboys. I understand it, but it should be illegal to subject us to watching the Colts in primetime yet again.
2 weeks,
in a row at that. I mean, my goodness. This one is Cowboys 10.5. It was up at 11 earlier in the week. The Colts have been able to slow down some high-powered offenses. They beat the Chiefs. That just seems like something that never actually happened, but it did. Obviously they almost beat the Eagles a couple of weeks ago. Kind of unraveled a little bit against a Pittsburgh team that I don't know is quite as competent on offense as Indy made them look at times this past week. But short week for the Colts. Cowboys running hot. Not exactly a dominant performance on Thanksgiving, but took care of business. I really like Dallas here. I mean, how high would this number have to get for you to take the other side? Or maybe do you like the Colts at 10.5?
I'm all over Dallas at this number. I think, we'd have to be at like the 12.5 point range for me to be thinking about Indianapolis. I just think that you have the most sackable quarterback in Matt Ryan going up against the team that sacks the quarterback the most in Dallas. That to me just kind of like lays the framework for a double digit win. And then, if Dallas gets things going on offense, then, but the rest is history and we get a fairly easy cover in an uncompetitive game. But maybe we need that just to like wind down after how electric Sunday afternoon is going to be.
Yeah, that is nice. I mean, I think we're going to be fired up for Dolphins Niners, going to be extremely fired up for Chiefs Bengals. I'm going to be, no matter what pick I end up making on Chargers Raiders, I know it's going to be wrong. So I'm going to be really fired up about that. Yep. It is always nice to have at least what we think is a bankable result on Sunday night. Monday Night Football, Saints, Buccaneers, Bucks, 3.5 point home favorites. Total for this game all the way down at 40.5. That might be high, man. The Bucks, what are we doing with the Bucks here? They're under 500. They seemingly, maybe, possibly turned a corner in Germany against Seattle. They finally were able to run the ball. That was the biggest question for me last week was, can they continue to do anything on the ground? Because we saw how much that opened up big plays for that offense through the air. And they look like the same old Bucks last week against the Browns. They're punting from the Cleveland 37. They're punting late in the game from the Cleveland 48. They weirdly don't seem to trust Tom Brady. Maybe rightfully so. Tom Brady, I don't know if he even trusts himself at this point. It's an offense that for 90% of this season just seems like it goes through the motions. Like the offense trots out there. It's like, all right, we got to go down and get a score. If we get even a field goal here, this game is over. First down, 1 yard rush. Second down, 2 yard out to Chris Godwin. Third down, incomplete, go ball to Mike Evans, punt. It's on a loop.
It's not a good loop to be in, but I don't see them snapping out of it. And, earlier this season when these two teams played, there was a lot of consternation saying like, okay, the Saints, they always have the Bucks number, but it was like, I'm still going with the Bucks here. But I had a very different opinion of the Bucks at that stage of the year than I do now. I think that they're an uninspired group, and I think the defense has taken a step back this year. I think the offensive line is an issue. Not sure what's going to be going on with Lattimore this time around, but if he's out there, then you can bet on Mike Evans just getting ejected in the second quarter. So as gross as it feels, I'm on some real gross sides this week, but the Saints are among them, and I'm ready to strap into the electric chair on Monday night and ride against Tom Brady on a Monday night past his bedtime. Give me the Saints.
Look, I can't come up with a good argument not to take the Saints other than the Saints are a bad football team. And Tampa might be as well. Like I'm not ready to say the Tampa defense, it's not nearly as good as it was the last 2 years. Like that we know. I still think it's a good defense. I think they're almost in the same position as the Broncos, where it's like, look, we're playing well here. We're doing our part. And if you give the other team 15 chances in a row and half of those come with good field position, we're going to let up some scores every now and then. And that last drive against Cleveland, I mean, I don't know what Carlton Davis was doing on Amari Cooper. That was pretty inexcusable, but I think with just like average offensive play, I think this defense would look a lot better, but they've been put in so many bad spots throughout the year.
Yes, they definitely have, and the offense is certainly busted. Like that. Basically, you watch them do the loop that you mentioned, or just try to run this hurry up. Try to have Tom Brady throw the ball like 50 times for 250 yards. Like it's ugly. They're not getting anything going downfield. It's always short. It's always these like tunnel screens, stuff like that, and it's not working.
They never seem to know the down and distance. Like they're playing everything like it's like 2nd and 2.
Yeah. And oftentimes it's not. And that ends up really coming back to bite them in several spots.
How often can you say about a Tom Brady team, like, like watching the Colts the other night, like, like Matt Ryan takes a sack. All of a sudden it's like 3rd and 16. And you're like, they might as well just punt here. They have no chance. That's how I feel about the Bucs. Like they've had a ton of penalties. They had some killer penalties last week against Cleveland. Like if they're facing a 2nd and long or a 3rd and long, I just feel like they have no shot. Like they don't seem to have any plays that can get chunk yardage when they need it.
No, that they don't. It's just not there. It's not working for them this year. So as bad as the Saints are, and they're not going to be able to score many points, that we're looking at a total here of 40.5.
Under.
And I love the under on that one. It's going to be, I think both these teams score in the teens.
Yeah, that's my strongest lean on this game right now is the under. And look, if this hangs around at 3.5, I like the Saints. I really do. I think this could be 17-14, it could be 16-13, maybe even 20-17 if we really get some fireworks on offense. But I don't think either of these teams are confident that they can move the ball right now. It's going to be ugly. I don't fault you. I don't fault anybody for taking the Saints, as wrong as it might feel. I think we're still collectively adjusting to the Bucs not being a good team. Like it was so many of their games the last couple of years have just felt like auto bets. Like, well, it's the Bucs. They have Tom Brady. They're going to win. Mm-hmm. Like it takes a while for that to wear off.
Yeah, I mean, like it really, like the only other team that I can think of that knocked off last year's goodwill is probably like the Rams.
Yeah, the Rams. I mean, the Packers certainly went through it. When they lost, was it 5 in a row to like Detroit and the Jets and the Commanders? Like I really had to do some soul searching on that one. But
sure,
I don't think the Packers never really reached that same level of dominance that we saw from teams like Tampa and the Rams. Let's get to our parlays and teasers of the week, John. I'll let you lead it off. Last week's parlays, as we said, they were thwarted. They were good bets. All of our bets are good.
Yes.
The teams just played badly, and that's why we lost. But give me your parlay of the week.
Okay, so I'm calling this one the Afternoon Delight parlay because this one is all the late afternoon slate, all 3 games contained in that window. So buckle up, folks. Give me the Bengals. Give me the 49ers. Give me the Seahawks. That pays out 3.19 to 1 plus 319 odds.
Okay, we're just talking money line there. So Bengals got to win straight up at home. 49ers have to win straight up at home. And the Seattle Seahawks have to win on the road at the Rams. I love the Seahawks leg of this. I'm not as confident as I'd like to be in the 49ers, but you know what I'm going to say here. Bengals is your biggest liability.
It absolutely is. I feel so queasy going against Mahomes like this, but if I have to do it, the Giant Slayer himself, Joe Burrow, is not a bad guy to be riding with.
I'm going with the Ravens money line, so they just have to beat the Broncos. I'm going with the Packers money line. I think Aaron Rodgers moves to 25-5 in his career against the Chicago Bears, and I'm with you on the Seahawks. I'm taking that Seahawks money line. Not getting as much juice here. I'm only at plus 155 on my 3. Not taking quite as many chances here, but I had to dial things back. We were like plus 1,500 these last couple of weeks, maybe biting off a little bit more.
I see those numbers and I get excited.
All right, so I'm going Ravens, Packers, Seahawks. You're going Bengals, 49ers, and Seahawks. Again, those are money line parlays. Let's go to the dog parlay of the week.
Okay, so here I just got a 2-fer here, and I got Raiders and Falcons. So the Raiders were underdogs when I put this down. That would have paid out plus 273, but obviously things have shifted a little bit. But I think we're seeing, as far as the money line odds for the Raiders, it is minus 110. So it's like not that far off from things. So I will continue with that, even if by definition I'm screwing up this segment.
Okay, I like it. Those both feel like coin flip games to me. Last week's underdog parlay, by the way, the Titans thwarted it. We hit on both the Panthers and the Steelers, and we were a Titans win away against Cincinnati from cashing that one. Going back to the well with the Titans. They're going to get their first big true win of the season. They're going to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm going to involve the Detroit Lions in this one. At the time that I made this parlay, they were underdogs. They are no longer underdogs, so we might have to throw a flag on this one. And I'm taking the Dolphins. I'm taking the Miami Dolphins. I think they get the running game going. Anytime they have the ball, that they're going to be looking to rip off big plays. And I'm curious to see whether that 49ers defense can hold up. That gets you to around plus 1,300. So some serious cash here. To be honest, don't feel great about any of those. I think I feel the best about the Lions beating the Jags. We've had the Jags in this position before where it feels like they're a little overvalued. And I'm not falling for it this time.
No, sir. No, we're sticking to it here. And yeah, potential letdown spot. This will run counter to my. How do I say this? I think the Dolphins are the liability. Based on what I was saying earlier about the Niners. So I again very excited for that game, but I'm Team Niners on that one.
Okay, that was very. You put that very respectfully, basically saying that your pick is terrible. But hey, we're going head to head on that one. All right, teaser of the week. We're 2 for 2 on our teasers thus far. Looking to keep the streak going. We got a 7-point teaser this week, and I need to invoke a stat here, John, that helped inform me on this week's teaser. So as you can hear, I'm killing time as I bring up said stat, which I did link in Beating the Book. Make sure you read that on RotoWire.com. So here's the stat. You would be 22-0 this season if you teased every Broncos and Rams opponent by 6 points. 22-0.
That's significant.
So who are the Broncos playing this week?
The Broncos are in Baltimore at the Big Crab Cake.
So we are going to tease the Ravens down to 1.5. They just have to win that game by 2. And can you remind me, who are the Rams playing this week?
The Rams have the Seahawks.
They do. So we're going to tease that one down to even. Seattle just has to win that game. Doesn't matter what the result is. They just have to win. And look, to make this a little more interesting, we're throwing in the Browns and the Texans total. We're teasing the total up to 53.5, and we're going under on that. I don't see how that loses, John.
I don't either. That's free money that you just printed for all of our wonderful listeners and viewers.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I needed that, after we really butted heads on that Dolphins 49ers game. But
got real contentious.
Yeah, I mean, look, the numbers say Ravens, Seahawks. All you got to do this year is play the Broncos and play the Rams, and you got to tease that by at least 6, and you're going to come away a winner. I just Broncos Texans. We talked about that game, or Browns Texans, excuse me. Either way, I don't see it being high scoring, right? Like, one, you definitely don't trust the Texans to pull their weight here. And I also don't see this being like a, 41-17 type of win for the Browns. Like, they could win in a romp, but I don't see them piling up a ton of points.
No, that's going to be low scoring. That again, we alluded to the rustiness of this Cleveland offense. And yeah, Houston, there's just no way that they're scratching over 21 points.
Okay.
Excuse me for 1 second. I have a visitor at the door. Give me 2 seconds. And we're back.
Was that the police coming in to say that it's illegal to get free money on this teaser?
There's a lot of heat on us right now. Absolutely.
Yeah, the pit boss showing up.
My kneecap's not in great shape.
Oh, man. All right. So that was the teaser of the week. Again, if you want to get in on the teaser action, if you want to tail us, if you want to go against us on any of these teasers or parlays, make sure you're doing that over at BetMGM, betmgm.com, the BetMGM app. And you absolutely, positively have to use our promo code BETROTO, BETROTO, to make that first wager risk-free. John, let's talk some college football. My friend, we got some coaching carousel news to dissect. We got championship week upon us. Still, in my mind, at least, some major implications at play for the college football playoff. Where do you want to go first?
I'd like to. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Did we lock in our best bets for the NFL side of things?
You know what, John? We did not. And we're going to, this is a podcast after all. So what we're going to do is pretend that this never happened. We're going to go back, make our locks, and then we will talk college football.
Lovely. Okay. Well,
all right.
I will lead us off here in that case.
Well, if you don't mind, let me do a little intro for the locks.
Got it.
For the listeners at home. All right, John, we got one thing left. It's time to lock up our picks of the week for NFL Week 13. I will be revealing my pick momentarily, but I'll let you lead us off. Who are you locking up this week?
You know what? It's the game of the week. I want to have a little bit of extra interest in it. So I'm looking at that Niners-Dolphins game. And as I said earlier, I'm confident that the Niners are able to cover that number. I think that it sounded like the action was pretty heavy on the Dolphins side of things earlier this week. I don't think that this one is that lopsided at this number. So as it stands, give me the Niners. I believe that at BetMGM, they are -4. I'm comfortable with that. I know it's a key number, but I will take the Niners, making a little bit of a statement win here at home against the Dolphins.
All right. Once again, you are dead to me. Nonetheless, I respect your pick. I'm deciding between two right now, John. I like the Vikings -3 at home. I'm not sure I'm ready to trust Mike White, but you know what? I'm going back to the Seattle Seahawks. They burned me last week. Let's see if they could burn me again. Locking up Seattle -7 at the Rams. This has nothing to do with Seattle. This is just betting against the LA Rams, who are a shell of their former self. They're down their top two receivers. They're down their starting quarterback. They're down maybe the best player in the NFL in Aaron Donald. I don't even think Seattle has to play that well, and they probably win this game by more than a touchdown. Don't love the number at 7. Nonetheless, locking it up. Seattle -7. You're locking 49ers -3.5. Like we said, make sure you use that promo code BETROTO, BETROTO, over at betmgm.com or on the BetMGM app. Let's talk some college football, John. We got coaching carousel news. We got championship week upon us. Still have some implications for the college football playoff. Where do you want to dive in first?
We'll start with the coaching carousel because it's been not as crazy as recent years, but obviously a couple of major chips have fallen. I'd love to get your opinion on this in a second, but I thought that it was a great hire from Wisconsin to go ahead and scoop Fickell out of Cincinnati. And I think, for better or for worse, it just always felt like the stars were aligning for one Matt Rule to go to Nebraska. You felt like Nebraska wanted a guy who is a program builder. And I think Rule is just way more comfortable at the college level. I know, and I think he's very cognizant of what he's stepping into there in Lincoln. His FaceTime on game day last week, just from the middle of some field with like the sun in his eyes, that showed me that he's ready for Lincoln primetime. That was some good stuff there. And I will comment just kind of like a more off the radar coaching move, but I liked Arizona State going ahead and scooping the offensive coordinator, one Kenny Dillingham, out of Oregon, grabbing him. I think that Arizona State was in desperate need of some fresh blood, a younger guy. They went ahead and did that. I think that Arizona is kind of in that second tier down when you're talking about states with in-state talent. Obviously, your California, Florida, Texas, Georgia of the world, that's its own tier. But I think Arizona is right there in that next group. So if they can, not necessarily put the fence up because Arizona has kind of moved ahead of them after the year that they've had, but even still, I think that Dillingham when we kind of come back to look at this coaching cycle, I think that's going to be coming out as one of the smarter hires from this 2022.
I'm just going to talk about Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. Hopefully you'll just cede the floor to me. I love this hire. I think that, had they given the job to Jim Leonard, I would have been okay with it. I think everybody would have just been like, okay, that's fine. That just keeps Wisconsin likely as a B tier program in the Big Ten indefinitely. I don't think you have a ton of hope of making that leap, toward joining Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, in what I view as kind of the A tier in that conference. And obviously, the elephant in the room is you have USC and UCLA joining this conference. I think USC immediately becomes a tier 1 program. UCLA, you probably just give them the B tier for now and kind of see what happens. But in order to have any chance to jump up to that A tier, and it's still relatively unlikely because Wisconsin is not Ohio State, it's not Michigan, it's not Penn State, it's not USC. I think they needed to bring in an outside hire, and truly this feels like about the best case scenario, right? If you can't lure Nick Saban away from Alabama, Luke Fickell feels like the absolute best case. One of those guys who, when that initial report came out that Wisconsin was quote unquote targeting Luke Fickell, the group chat started going wild, and a lot of my friends are like, why would he even take this job? Like, is Wisconsin even a better job? Everybody thinks he's waiting maybe for Ohio State to eventually open up. So the fact that I think that Luke Fickell expressed interest in this job, I think kind of made it a quick decision for Wisconsin, right? I mean, like, if you have a chance to get somebody who's built that type of program, had more success at Cincinnati than Wisconsin has had at Wisconsin, I think you do it. So to me, it was somewhat of a no-brainer. I know there are a lot of people, internally with the program, a lot of the players came out and said, they were miffed that Jim Leonhard didn't get a chance at this job, but it's not like Jim Leonhard took over and the Badgers ran the table and are going to the Big Ten title. Like, they're coming off of a pretty depressing loss to Minnesota. Yeah. So I get that Jim Leonhard was put in a tough spot. Ideally, you give a coach several years to kind of get his guys in there, build the program. I understand all that. I just don't think that there was big picture college football landscape 5, 10, 15 years in the future. I don't know that Jim Leonhard was going to be the guy who was ever going to give Wisconsin a chance to truly ascend in the way that Fickell can.
Right. It was disappointing the way the things played out with Leonhard, and he's done so good by the Wisconsin program. And yeah, he basically, the way I summed it up was he flubbed the audition.
Right.
They were quick to give Paul Chryst the axe, for lack of a better word, and Leonhard just like it just never really clicked in there. And I know that he's a great Wisconsin man and everything, but Fickell is a sure thing as far as a head coach and the face of your program, great culture builder. I'm interested to see where he moves the fall camp to. He's famously done it in Indiana with the Cincinnati guys. I'm sure there'll be some town in northern Wisconsin for him to get the boys ready for the upcoming season. And you get to cook with the ingredients that Wisconsin has and in the surrounding areas. Don't have to worry about if so many of the factors working against you, as it were, when Fickell was coaching a group of 5 Cincinnati team. They're obviously moving to the Big 12. So love this hire for Wisconsin. And then my one last idle comment, this was me just kind of like lurking around on Twitter, but I see that Trent Dilfer gets hired by UAB. And Trent Dilfer has been a coach at I believe to be a fairly high-level high school in Tennessee, and done well there. And I think Dilfer can kind of be a good culture guy at UAB as well. But I did see a UAB fan bemoaning the hire and saying, I thought that you guys were telling us that we had Tom Herman coming and now we get Dilfer. And it feels so cruel to like sell that type of dream to a UAB fan base. Like if you're a type of insider, it's like, yo, we can get this. So I just kind of had a diabolical thought about like getting really involved in like the Texas State message boards and kind of like floating the idea that like they are going to get Lincoln Riley and like coming up with all these fake parallels or connections that they have to Lincoln Riley. And it's like, oh, I thought we were getting Lincoln.
No dice. Tom Herman, by the way, accepted the FAU job.
I know. So I guess I was a little bit off base.
Yeah, a little bit. Are we going to see Deion Sanders coaching a Power 5 program next year?
Yes. I would love to see him at Colorado. I think that would be a lot of fun. I think he could also do really well at USF. But, if he can get Travis Hunter to come to Jackson State, then, who knows? I don't know if he's actually a great X's and O's coach. I don't know if anyone does. But I do know that he can get guys in the door. So there's absolutely something to be said for that. You just also kind of have to come to the realization that like you are absolutely a stepping stone. Like it's sort of like signing up for the Lane Kiffin experience, but at a different level.
All right, let's get to championship week bets, John. Utah, USC, that's the big headliner on Friday. K-State, TCU in the early window on Saturday. LSU, Georgia in the afternoon. Then we got the Big Ten and the ACC at night. What are your major leans this weekend?
All right, so I'll get through these quickly. I'll lead us off with the first game tomorrow night or Friday night. I like UTSA -8.5 in the Conference USA Championship. Meep, go Runners. I like Utah to actually go ahead and spoil things potentially for USC and cover that spread. That I think is the biggest. That and K-State are the two games with the most potential chaos. I think Michigan, even with the Blake Corum news that he's going to be done for the year, I think that they absolutely pound Purdue into the ground pretty resoundingly. I think as far as the total in the SEC championship game, I think it's going to be a sloppy game. It's going to be low scoring. I don't think that LSU is going to move the ball at all. But I also am a little bit skeptical of the way that the Georgia offense is operating at the moment. So at 52.5, I'm going to take the under on that one. I will take the Frogs. All glory to the Hypnotoad, -2.5 against K-State. Roll Wave, -3.5 against UCF. And then if you have that certain itch to bet Sunbelt, keep an eye on whether Grayson McCall is back for Coastal Carolina, because I think they give Troy a run for their money if he is back. But if not, then I'm probably staying away.
Okay. I like it a lot. Looking forward to championship weekend. Very much looking forward to Utah, USC tomorrow night. Saturday is going to be just a smorgasbord. We got Wisconsin Marquette basketball going on Saturday as well. Yeah, we're going to have ourselves a nice little weekend here. And we'll leave it on this. DeColdis Crawford has officially entered the transfer portal, John.
He was a Scott Frost guy. So, I understand the loyalty to the Frost man. It hurts to see DeColdis go. I think he had like one of the most like lucrative NIL deals, or certainly one of the most viral, going with that cooling company out in Nebraska. So tough to see him go. Not an impact player whatsoever this past year, though, unfortunately. So
not at all. But if you have a name like DeColdis, people are going to be talking about it, and he's going to be a hot commodity in the portal. All right, man. Fun chatting with you as always. Best of luck this week.